Hey everyone, and welcome back. So, kind of long awaited. We've teased it and talked to you guys a bit. We have a special guest who does not need any introduction. You all know him very well. We have Mr. HAKUNAMYDATA himself today with his deck list that he topped the North American YCS with. He was 13th after Swiss, but I'll let him go into most of the details here now, I guess. So, without further ado, here he is.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. It's always nice to have you on the channel.
I think it's pretty standard, right? Like three original Cyber Dragon, three core, three hers, two Naxer, and then the two soldiers. I think for a machine dupe variant, that's quite standard. I mean, I know people play anywhere between one to two, maybe sometimes three Naxers. I forget what you play, John, but I think like no one would really argue against this ratio. I think it's pretty common. Same with the
Yeah,
soldiers. Sometimes people play three, and we did a whole video on the two versus three thing.
yeah.
So not in the one Jizukuru. I think that's pretty established at this point for a machine dupe variant.
Yeah.
And then yeah, I don't know if you had any thoughts on that.
I'm on the one Naxter at the moment, but like when people ask me one versus two, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. It's kind of just, um, what you want to do. By all means, I really do like two. I think three is a bit
Mm.
much, but one or two, I don't think there's a wrong answer.
Yeah, I mean, I've personally never tried three myself, but yeah, I like two. And then the rest of the monsters, just like the three Ash, and then we have the three Imperms later, which is just rounds up the six hand traps and the Dragoon package. I mean, I know you were also trying without Dragoon. I don't know if you still are. I was trying that as well for at least a month or so. And it is still definitely good. I miss that sort of, quote unquote pure aspect. I just felt that, from a competitive standpoint, because I realized I just had to go first against a deck like Drytron, I needed another form of negate in terms of Dragoon and things like that. So that's why I decided to play it. I mean, the bricks, yeah, it's unfortunate, but one thing I came to realize was that this deck can brick anyways, even without the Dragoon package. And at least with Dragoon, you have your core that serves as the on card Dragoon. And there were plenty of times during the tournament where I had these awkward hands where, let's say, you draw too many like hand traps or other going second cards, but at the very least, you just have like the core to bring out Dragoon, and it's certainly strong on its own as well.
Yeah, definitely.
And the rest of the spells, you have the three emergencies, one repair plan, ref system. That's also, I think, standard. I at the early days when I used to play this deck, I used to play two repair plants. I cut it to one back when Infer Noble was tier one because with hand loops going on, I mean, I just had to just try to fit in as many hand traps as possible. And after cutting it down to one, I realized it was still fine. I mean, sometimes I would say I miss it when I really want to search like a kaiju because I already used the first repair plan for a soldier or something, but I think it's pretty minimal. And then we have some other powerhouse spells, Forbidden Droplet. I was trying main decking Droll instead of three droplets, but I really like Droplet, especially if your opponent plays Dragoon, then you just get completely screwed if you don't have something like this in the main. And I mean, not that, there's too many tier one decks with Dragoon. I mean, although it turns out that Drytron started playing Dragoon, so kind of worked out. And then I do like to play at least some form of back removal in the main and the Cyclones and Lightning Storm. And Lightning Storm is a little bit more versatile because it can hit sorry, I can't talk. Attack position monsters as well. And I like having quick play spell traps, especially because of Imperial Order or even anti-spell. At least Tri-Brigade, we know they main deck Imperial Order. I mean, it's only just two cards I know, and I said that in my profile as well, but it
But
did
they
come up.
also
And
always
worst
open
case,
it, so
yeah, yeah, yeah. And like worst case, like most decks will at least have like one card that they said or some kind of field spell they'll activate that you can at least chain to and get rid of it. And 1,000 life points, it's really minimal. I mean, I can't really have Twin Twisters and Droplet in the same deck when, especially in the main, when you're already discarding potentially, right? So that's why I think Cyclone's also just more popular anyways right now. And then the three machine dupes and the overload fusion, I don't think that really requires explanation. The droplet, or I mean, not the droplet, the prosperity, really, really strong. I would say there were hands, especially when I went first against Drytron. I remember I had like such a good hand in terms of having like the summon limit, machine dupe, like one hand trap. The problem was I didn't have a target and I had the prosperity. And of the six cards I excavated, I actually only had one Naxer, and then like the remaining were not any form of targets whatsoever. So I'm like, okay, that'll do. It's not a core, but it actually might have been better, or it might have been better that it was, something like an Xer, because if my opponent had something like Gamma, for example, I mean, not that he did, but in just that situation where, because core's effect is mandatory, so at least now I can have like the machine resolve with the body on board. And then traps, yeah, just the imperms like I mentioned and the one overflow. So that's it for the main. I don't know if you wanted to talk about this before we proceed to any of
Um,
the
yeah, sure.
item
I
extra.
kind of keep it separated, I guess. 43 cards. I think that's the first thing everyone's going to notice. Is there a reason?
Yeah, I mean, so with the Dragoon list, I always played 42 just to make up for the two completely dead cards in Red Eyes and Dark Magician. I mean, Red Eyes Fusion, ideally for us, we don't like to draw it unless it's against some back row heavy deck, then it becomes useful. But at least on its own, Red Eyes Fusion does something. Whereas Dark Magician and Red Eyes, if you draw it, they're just completely dead. You can't even pitch it for Naxer because then the engine is dead. So just to make up for that, I used to always play 42. And then the reason I bumped to 43 was because I had six hand traps, so in an opening hand of five cards, because you need it while your opponent's going off, one in six, it was roughly around like 55% ish in a 43 card deck, and then back row hate, if I bumped it up to four, which is where I added the two cyclones, so then in an opening hand of six cards, because we're going second and you can draw back row removal cards as your sixth card, one in the four cards in 43 card deck in opening hand of six was roughly like 47-48%. So I set this arbitrary cutoff of like generally one in two kind of chance to draw either of those categories, and that I'd be fine with. So, and sometimes it doesn't work out, right? Like you draw a cyclone, they play a deck where they didn't play any sets, but I just wanted that random cutoff. And the difference between 42 versus 43 was so minimal to me that it was fine and it worked out well.
Sure. I do see Bell in your side deck, but how do you feel like with Ash and Bell? Mostly with, I mean, I guess you wouldn't have known prior to the event that Tri Brigade would be so dominant, but now that they did take up almost 30% of the top cuts, how do you feel on the whole Ash versus Bell?
Yeah, so actually, it's funny. When I did my meta-analysis video, I did see a whole bunch of Tri-Brigade, so I thought perhaps that might be a signal that we would see a ton of Tri-Brigade in the YCS as well, because I did that just before that event. Ghost Spell against Tri-Brigade, I mean, it's weird. Like, Ghost Spell's only really great if you had another hand trap along with it against Tri-Brigade, because otherwise they have Appaloosa set up, and the Ghost Spell is going to be dead. But for me, fortunately, I did have the Imperm with the Ghost Spell when I did have Ghost Spell, and so basically I prevented them from making Appaloosa. And then when my turn rolled around and they tried to revolt, the Ghost Spell was just super clutch, and so I think it's good. But the thing is, it's also good against Drytron, so that's why I opted to play it. Whereas where I used to have something like Lancia, and Lancia is good against Tri-Brigade too, but it's not useful against Drytron, and I needed some more cards against Drytron because going second against that deck is just so incredibly difficult. So yeah, I think it's still a good card to have, but against Tri-Brigade, it's just dependent on if you have another hand trap, I would say.
Sure, that's pretty good. You already touched on a couple times the whole two storm, two cosmics between wanting to see like playing the four because you're playing more than 40, and the versatility of the quick play versus the blowout capability of storm. And then for anyone who didn't know, he also mentioned about twisters with discarding from forbidden droplet twisters. I don't think we really need to go in depth too much more on your back row removal choices, but just in case anyone missed, that's kind of the summary, unless I think that's pretty much it with those.
Mhm.
So, otherwise, as far as the main deck, there's really nothing else that jumps out for what you have. It's more the two cards you don't have. A lot of people, I mean, personally, I dropped them both as well, but the one Fear and Cyberload Fusion, a lot of people do still like to play those. Is there a reason that you opted not to?
Yeah, so I really like Cyberload Fusion. When I'm not playing the Dragoon build, I definitely play it because the interaction with like Overflow and then you put them back with Cyberload Fusion, it's super fun. It's really good. But I felt that, with the Anaconda, when you're playing Dragoon, you typically prioritize using Red Eyes Fusion more than Overload Fusion, which means you don't banish as much. I mean, you still banish through Overflow. The other part is Cyberlow Fusion, it's also a card, for example, if you ever draw it in like your opening hand, it's generally pretty dead and it's something you don't really want to have it in your opening hand. And so to have that and Red Eyes Fusion, so in having three fusion spells in total, I felt was a bit excessive, and I didn't need it. But Cyberload Fusion definitely it does provide very unique plays in Cyber Dragons if you play sort of the pure build. And I know some people who play that on top of the Dragoon package as well, but I just decided to not run it, and it worked out fine. As for Fear, it's a good card, but I felt, for example, everyone always mentions the chain blocking aspect. But for example, a lot of times with core, you're probably searching repair plant to get the soldier. So if you chain block the Ash there, then they can just Ash on the repair plant anyways, which they typically would as well usually. Another part is, it's good if you can protect the core from something like Gamma, but when you want core to stay on board, it's probably because you want to use Machine Dupe. But the problem is once you bring out the Fear, the attack boost makes it so you can't use Machine Dupe on core. And I would say another point with Fear is that it messes up the summoning count for trying to play around or playing through Nibiru, because if you do, let's say, core and then you summon out the Fear and then you do your typical repair plan and Galaxy Soldier Hearst play because you have to link off the core first. So then that means your second soldier becomes your fifth summon instead of Nova being the fifth summon because you only summon the core. So that would also mess things up. So I just never felt really the need for it. I think it's kind of nice in Dragoon build because it just gives you two bodies pretty easily. But I hardly ever ran that card, and I just I would never say that I missed it or that it would have led to a win if I had it.
Yeah, I think my favorite part was actually that it was a level 4 for overflow,
Yeah, yeah, it's
and
true. It's true.
it just felt kind of sacky keeping it in for that reason, because more often than not, I would just have it in the deck and dump it off of Rampage anyway, and it was, if I see it, it's a free body. But like you said, the Nibiru thing, especially depending the format, that's really really big when like Nibiru's popular,
Mm,
because we actually play through it decently well, especially
yep.
in the Dragoon builds, because you can burn them for 3,000 and still end with at least one negate on board. So that was a
It's
very
true.
good point, and I loved the way you said it. It might have been the Galaxy Soldier video when you first had mentioned something like that, or even one of your videos watching. But your reasoning about if chain blocking the Ash on the core doesn't mean anything when they Ash the card you search, and that was just
Yeah.
like a really big, like, that's a really really good point. So
And right now, Imperm and Veiler, they're also very popular. So like chain blocking does nothing against those cards.
yeah,
So
another good reason. But yeah, I think that's all I really had for the main deck. So if you want to start
yeah,
a
I can see
side or
the
the extra, whatever one you
yeah, I
would
guess
like.
we'll go with the extra, just in typical fashion. I would say again, pretty standard. We see the All Mirage to get your baby Cyber Engrave, Anima, hers and Naxxra level ones, Anaconda for Overload and Red Eyes Fusion. Link Spider, that's become, I would say, popular since Emmanuel Lilly topped the extravaganza with Cyber Dragons and he featured it. And of course, John, you and I talked about how we were thinking about that as well leading up to it, but we never really, or at least I didn't actually play it, but I decided to do it, and it actually did make a big difference, especially when dinos were popular. The Lost World token is really problematic for us when they have Lost World
Yeah,
because
because you
we
can't use
can't
your
target it.
yeah.
Our machine geek becomes dead. But the thing is, I felt dinos were probably not going to be played too much, and I think that was actually the case. So it was purely for like Nibiru purposes, and Seeger, of course, we need it for OTK. But it doesn't come up as much as you would think, I find. I think because usually you either just Dragoon, pop, and burn and then attack for game, or Infinity just and Rampage on its own. But yeah, it's there. Zeus, we're not Zodiac, but it can definitely come up. At most, we would have four materials. I mean, against normal summon reliant decks, it's quite nice. I mean, against like prank kids, it's really useful. And I would say, I mean, if I'm thinking like rogue options, I mean, I know Unchained is a pretty popular rogue deck, and Zeus is kind of nice because they're not destroying them, it's just sending. Then the two Nova Infinity, I think that's just, I don't want to say too standard of a ratio. That's just the standard ratio I've always played. But I know some people will play like one and two of each or one and one of each, and that's totally fine. And realistically speaking, because we're playing Prosperity, like the one of each will be gone anyways. And then the Fusion, Dragoon, of course, Rampage. I tried to Mega Fleet because I thought there would be a lot of Sky Striker and Salad, and maybe there were, but I only played against one Salad, and that was round one. I never played against Striker. So it didn't really come up, and it's also another one that gets banished with Prosperity. I would probably just put one of them back for Mecha Buff for now. And yeah, and then the last fortress is kind of nice. You get to get rid of their Zeus, Mekaba, and also our own Jizukuru.
Sure. So I actually like 2 Nova 2 Infinity right now as well. I go back and forth whether it's one of either of them and two of the other. Sometimes like one Nova 2 Infinity or flip flop that or even one of each. But like especially with like when they revolt and they summon the Omen and banish your Nova right away, it doesn't trigger it. So having those extra copies and things like that is actually really helpful a lot of the time. But yeah, it's nice to see that you were. I mean, you like you had mentioned, you always pretty much play those, but I do actually really like that um, ratio
Hmm.
choice for this format at least.
Yeah, and then I guess if we move to the side, my side, honestly, I really liked it because every card on my side played a really big role in securing the win in whatever throughout the tournament. The Droll, of course, that's for Drytron. And it's technically good against some other decks too. And Ghost Bell, we already talked about it. Nibiru, again, like I mentioned, I thought Salad would be pretty common, especially in like earlier rounds. And then it's pretty good against just combo decks in general. I put it against Drytron, and so it actually came out quite clutch when you have another hand trap along with it. And I just have another third copy of Cosmic Cyclone. It used to be a Pancretos, but the thing was, I was worried about things like Imperial Order, Anti-Spell, but also Sky Striker, I was worried about the Mystic Mine. So I wanted to just have a spell version instead. We have the red reboot for additional back row hate, and then of course my going first option summon limit, but the other one that I introduced a couple months back was the Imperial Order for another going first option. And sometimes if my opponent scoops right away and I don't know what they were playing and I'm not sure if they're going first or second, I would just the two storms, because they're purely going second cards, I would just replace that with like a Cyclone and Imperial Order just in case. Because then now, you have cards like Droplet and Imperm that can be used going first or second, and you have the hand traps, of course, and then Cyclone's a quick play, and Imperial Order, even if you go second, for example, which is exactly what happened against one of my rounds against Dogmatic Invoke Shadow. I was actually going second, but I just put Imperial Order anyways, and it won me the game because he was trying to play Shadow Fusion, and it was like, nope. Fun. Yeah.
So is there any changes you would make to the deck? It sounds like you're pretty happy with, well, pretty much all of it, the side deck, everything you had mentioned playing its role, extra deck. You had mentioned other than the Mega
Mhm.
Fleet change, I guess. Is there anything kind of looking back at how the whole all the events developed moving forward, are there changes you would make to continue going
Yeah,
into
that's
the
a good
format?
question. I think I'm good for now. Like, yeah, I would probably change the one Mega Fleet for Mechaba, but I mean, the side was really good. And so, and main deck, I don't have any issues, I would say. So for now, I think I'm good for this format that I really like it.
And I think a big one people may wonder is you opted for obviously Droll and Nibiru and other cards, but no Lancia even in the side deck.
Yeah, I did play Lancia for quite some time, and the thing I alluded to this earlier was that Lancia is not useful against Drytron, and Drytron I just needed to heavily side against them because if you let them build their board, basically, anything on their board, like whatever ultimateness, like it's fine because you have cards like Droplet or Dark Ruler or Kaiju, but the real problem against that deck going second is the Orange Heralds in hand because going second, there's just like no cards you can play to stop them from activating that from their hands, right? Like, I mean, if you have Call by the Grave, you can Call by the Eva, but A, that's just a one of, and B, that still means they would have resolved like Orange Held like once. And for us, a negate and destroy is pretty problematic, and I don't think we can really play through multiple of that. So the best way for Drytron is just to really just prevent them from setting up anything in the first place. So I just wanted to like load up on hand traps, and Lancia just wasn't going to work, so I needed something like Ghost Spell, which also happens to be pretty good, like I said, against Tri Brigade, depending on whether they have Appaloosa and whether you have another hand trap.
Sure. So obviously in a remote duel it's pretty difficult to do it, but say with locals opening up and such with your main deck, if you knew you were going into a Drytron matchup game 1, would you opt to go first or second if you won the die roll?
That's funny.
This is-
I personally, I never switch my guess sort of. I don't know what to say, but like even if I knew I would play Drytron, I think it's probably better to just go first. But I would still go second. I think I
Yeah,
wouldn't
just
change that.
yeah.
Just in terms of like, yeah, just not. I don't know what the right word for that is. I don't want to change things just for the sake because I know what they're playing. I wanna just assume I don't know what they're playing, basically.
Just
And
kind
what's
of
funny is that I played against three Drytrons at the tournament, and all three game ones I actually somehow won, even though I didn't build it that way, but it just worked out because I
sure.
drew like or some kind of hand trap.
Yeah, so just kind of letting the deck let the deck do what it needs to do and just pilot it as well as you can. Because
Yeah,
I
and
do
just
see a
hope for the
lot of
best.
people say, I didn't plan on asking you that question. I just kind of thought of it, and I was like, I do see a
Mhm.
lot of people who are like, oh, I just choose to go first against them game one even, and I mean, I have done it before too, but like you said, it is kind of nice to just like you built the deck because you like trust it and you believe that it can get the job done. So you kind of just gotta
Mhm.
put that trust in your deck that I'm gonna go
Mhm.
second. I want to go second, and let the deck do what it needs to, and then just pilot it as well as you can.
Yeah, but I mean, of course, there's nothing wrong with intentionally
No,
choosing to go first because you know what they're playing, because that is part of, especially tournament play. Like when
sure.
there's in physical play, top tables, people are just like looking around as people are playing, and if they know because I'm sure some people, if they knew what I was playing, they might actually just force me to go first too. So yeah,
Sure.
it's part of the game.
So, but otherwise, I guess not too much else to really mention as far as your deck goes. How were your matchups? You had mentioned three Drytron.
Yeah, it was a good mix. I mean, it was three Drytrons, two Ogmaticum Vuxoral, two Tri Brigade. So those were sort of the tier one decks. And then I had some. So I mentioned Salad in round one. It was a Subterra Dragoon. So that one I was actually scared of. And that player I know is quite good. He like topped multiple YCSs. And then another rogue deck was Code Talkers. That was funny. I mean, so this was round six too. So we were both 5-0. Like he was doing really well at this deck, and I know he made day two. It was funny because you linked me, and then I had a Cyber Dragon in hand, but it wasn't actually that easy of a matchup. Like it was a tough game three. I mean, that deck just had extender after extender. It was pretty wild, but fortunately, I did pull out of that one. And then my only loss was to Orcust Mech Knight, and that's the guy he's actually in top 16 heading into the live stream. So I'm not going to reveal his strategy, but that one was definitely interesting. A pretty cool deck. And game three, unfortunately, I opened all three copies of Emergency, and I didn't open any form of like hand trap or going second card. So it's once per turn. I wasn't gonna do that well that game. It was pretty brutal. I'm like, oh my god, I want to see this card, but not this many.
Yeah, you're gonna have to just play one from now on. Then you'll never open
Yeah,
more.
exactly, exactly.
But but and obviously without going into details because they didn't play out the top 16, top 32 didn't go as planned. But obviously, still was
Mm.
there almost 1,900 people or something like that, and
Yeah, it was
go
something like 1,900
to
players. It's
yeah.
crazy. It's so many
Yeah,
people.
going 9-1-1, like no matter how Top Cut plays out, going 9-1-1 is insane, especially with a deck that most people just overlook and say, yeah, that deck's not that good. So,
Yeah, no, it's honestly didn't even feel that way in terms of going 9-1-1. It was just sort of like one match at a time, especially like day two. It's like the next day. It's like a completely new sort of record the way you see it. And then yeah, and it was like really nerve-wracking because it was 8-1-1 hitting into final round. So that meant if I won the final round, I guaranteed top cut. But if I don't win, I guaranteed not making top cut because like X2, some X2s make it, some don't. But if you're X2-1, obviously you're not gonna have any chance. So it was like a lot of pressure too. But fortunately, it worked out. It was against a Tri Brigade player, and it was a while. I played really well throughout the entire event except for that final round. I made so many dumb misplays in games two and three because I was so nervous. But those games two and three just happened to be the ones that I won as well. So I got pretty lucky there that my misplays didn't cost me.
uh, luckily it wasn't something that had come up in this tournament, but for people who, because I see all the time they get real discouraged at events, like if you go and you lose your first two rounds, like, do you have any tip to like get over that mental like to get back into it. I guess the last real event I actually went to was the regional in Chicago, and it was with Cyber Strikers, and I ended up going 6-2-1 with the event, and somehow missed top 48 still. But I
Mm.
started the event 0-2-1, and that's why my tiebreakers were so bad. But I was so tempted to just drop out of the event and go home, and I was just like, it's okay, it's whatever. I just want to see what we can do now. And then ended up winning out the rest of it and got 49th out of 48. So that was a bummer, but
Oh, yeah.
um,
I mean, I think that what you just said is really the main thing. You like just try to have fun, especially when you're playing a rogue deck too, right? Like you have to have sort of realistic standards and expectations. And I mean, if you lose two in a row, yeah, that's definitely discouraging. Especially in an event like this, like YCS, which probably won't happen too often. I think you should still at least, try and see, or try another round or so, and
yeah.
just to keep going. Like it's good practice. And yeah, I mean, I think that's
Yeah,
what I can say
that
is
was
because going in, honestly, I obviously didn't expect to do this well. I'd just go like, maybe I'll go like X2 after 4 rounds, like get my participation mat and then go on my happy way. But yeah, sometimes it works out, and sometimes it doesn't, especially when you're playing a rogue deck. It's rogue for a reason, right? Like you're not going to be consistently finishing in top 32 or top 8 or whatever. But
sure.
yeah, I think as long as you like play some matches, have fun, and then hopefully you can like learn out of the experience. I mean, a YCS, like I said, it doesn't happen too often, so I wouldn't want to drop out too early from that. Just at least get a few rounds in, and yeah.
Sure. Yeah, and like I think too a big thing people don't realize, like, anyone can have a bad day, and like you're not always going to do great. I remember it was the Wisconsin regional DZ actually, like I think it was by round 4 he actually like dropped out of the event cuz he just it wasn't having a good day despite Altergeist actually being really good that format. It's just the matchups weren't falling in his favor. Or I've seen a guy who goes to my locals who actually has a few YCS top 8s and stuff. I've seen him drop out after 3 rounds too, and I feel like sometimes you don't realize, like, these even those types of players, they don't always have a good day, and sometimes you just gotta accept that, hey, it was just a bad day, and not try to
Mhm.
overreact too much to it.
I know it's true, and this game it can swing pretty wildly, like right, like with just one loss. So yeah, it definitely even like the best players, like some of these top ranked players that you just mentioned, yeah, like they can drop early, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, and that's just kind of the nature of this game.
Sure. I guess only kind of one other question you might not want to answer, but top couple Cyber Dragon players, and why is it you?
What's that?
I said top few Cyber Dragon players, and why are you in it? Just
Oh
you
no,
don't have to answer.
I
I know
kind of
you
want to
don't
put
like to.
myself.
No, I know you don't like to put yourself up there, but I think the community has you up there. But I completely
Yeah, I
understand
mean,
it. But
yeah, maybe. I mean, I personally don't even want to be considered that way. Like, I find it would just in a way add unnecessary pressure that I don't want. Like I just want to have fun. I mean, I'm not like Yassine or Blair Hunter. I think they have multiple tops, and yeah, I'm certainly not at their level. I know obviously Alex as well. He was the one that went top 8 in Chicago. Those guys are all definitely up there, but I'm not quite ready to put myself there yet.
so, but that's okay because at the end of the day, we don't get to give ourselves those accomplishments anyway. It's the community, so
Mm.
if they say it, that's what it means. But yeah, congratulations again. I don't know if you have any more comments really, but otherwise, thanks for coming on the channel and really going in depth behind your deck and the format and everything, and even those few random questions that I kind of thought of as we were doing the video. And you did pretty good for being right on the spot, and I didn't mean to do that to you, but
Oh no, no,
uh,
no, definitely. I
so
mean, I really don't have anything else to say other than, obviously everyone check out Team Set Passes other Cyber Dragon content, and yeah, thanks for having me.
yep. And anyone who's not already, I will throw his link in the description down below. And go check out Hakuna My Data for honestly my favorite YouTube content, because like your analytical breakdowns are just they're so nice. They save so much time, and I don't gotta punch in numbers on the computer and try to do it the hard way. And I love your content.
Thank you.
So, but yeah. So otherwise, thanks for watching, guys, and take care.